Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Release Notes, the monthly webinar from Raza, where we take you through the latest product updates. I'm Karen with the marketing team at Raza. Today, we have an exciting lineup of new features recently shipped in April, and a little bit of a preview of what's coming soon. First, a quick refresher on this webinar series. Beyond the Release Notes happens once a month. Each broadcast runs for about 45 minutes. And every month, we invite a panel of speakers from the Raza product, engineering, and research teams to talk about new features that are rolling out to Raza users. The idea is that you have one easy place that you can find out about the most important Raza updates. And it's also a chance to look behind the curtain and discuss product directly with the folks who are building Raza. So let's go ahead and introduce our speakers. We've got Alex Wiedauer, Raza's co-founder and CEO. Scott Truitt, VP Product Management. We've got Ed Makavaz, a Senior Product Designer with us today, as well as Matthew Vielkind, Solutions Engineer, and Vincent Warmerdam, Raza's Research Advocate. All right, so first up on the agenda, we have Alex, who's kicking things off with a welcome and an overview of the latest Raza news. Next up is Scott with an update on product plans for Q2 and beyond. Ed's going to take us through a detailed preview of a couple of new features that are coming soon. So that'll be workspaces and improvements to entity annotation. Matthew will pick things up with a preview of another very cool feature, the Twilio Voice connector. And then finally, Vincent's going to send us out with a look at our newly added support for spaCy 3.0 in Raza. All right, so today's presentation will be recorded. So you can log back into the event platform anytime after the broadcast ends to rewatch it. We will also be emailing that recording to participants so that you can share it with a colleague or catch up later. We'll also, I'm not sure if we'll be doing Q&A. We were having a little bit of technical difficulties on this broadcast. But if we get that up and working, you will be able to submit your questions through the Q&A window at any point during the broadcast, and we'll save them till the end. All right, so with that, Alex, I will go ahead and hand things over to you.
Thank you so much, Karen. And yeah, welcome everyone to the Behind the Release Notes webinar. I'm excited to be here with you. And to kick things off, I just kind of wanted to quickly talk a little bit about why Raza exists as an open source community and as a company, and really why we are here today. And I think what unites us all in our community is really that we want to make great assistants easy to build. And I think this has a lot of emphasis on both creating just much better assistants, but also making them easy to build for a lot of other developers, because we really believe that this is super, super critical to fulfill this big promise of conversational AI that people have been talking about for decades. We also think this is not easy, and that's actually also why we as a company have thought a lot about what are the guiding principles for us in the long run, and really that inform all of our decisions day to day. And you, of course, lots of you have been participating in our open source community, and it's really true to our heart and very dear. Free education today is another example of that, but really also nurturing this active and diverse community through contributors and just getting a lot of feedback and helping folks out. We'll also talk a little bit about research today, and I think in more further webinars, even more so in detail, but shipping applied research to solve real problems that you face day to day and building better assistants is really, really important to us. And then, of course, also really going high touch with the enterprise customers that we work with, because we really believe that this engagement helps us a lot to learn how general conversational AI scales, and really what to take from that back and build into our products. And really underpinning all of this is that we want to empower diverse, inclusive, and multidisciplinary teams, because we truly believe that building the best conversational AI is not done by one person. It's not done by only developers. It's not done by only domain experts, but like really a multidisciplinary team that works together to build these products. And that's what drives us as a company and as a team, and I think also what really unites us as a community. And so looking ahead for June, we're super excited about our next L3 AI conference. So that's like the second edition. The first one was last year. And I still very vividly remember the amazing atmosphere that we created through this like online platform that we used. It was just fascinating to see people logging in from all over the world, from like Hong Kong all the way to India to Brazil. Really the whole like Rasa community, and really I should say like the extended Rasa community also united in one place. And that happens again on June 17th. I'm super stoked for that. And we have already like an amazing set of early speakers that we announced. And like Greg, for example, from Salesforce, we'll be talking about conversation design, and Hans as well, actually, the co-founder and dean of the Conversation Design Institute. And then Emily from Voiceful will be talking about that integration of like how you can really build better assistants through designing conversations in advance as well. And then I'm super stoked for Heather to be back at a Rasa conference. She was already at Rasa Summit earlier this year. And we'll be talking about how T-Mobile scales their assistants to millions of users. So that's super exciting, and it's still early in the process. So we would love to hear from you if you want to speak. We're looking for speakers in the research domain, but also generally like experiences in like scaling assistants across the board. So feel free to reach out to us and go to the link. I think it's posted here in the webinar as well. And really looking forward to have you all here. Next. Just looking back, we, as every month, like had tremendous amount of new contributors, which is super exciting. We're now in total like over 600 folks that contributed to Rasa in form of like code contributions. So that might be to the Rasa Open Source framework, or through support contributions. It might be through like a blog post or like a YouTube video. And we are super excited that this keeps on continuing and growing really fast. So thank you to everyone here. As you can see, like people from all over the world. We have folks from Germany, Malaysia, India, Brazil. So it's super exciting to see that this like global community is growing. And thank you so much for all your contributions. And so without further ado, let's get started with the Behind the Release Notes webinar in detail. I'm really excited for everything that we've shipped in April with Rasa Open Source 2.5, as well as Rasa X 0.39. And there are much more qualified folks to talk about that in detail. So I'll pass over to Karen, I believe, before we dive into it.
Nope, I take it from here, Alex, but all good. Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Truitt, VP of Product Management at Rasa. And I want to talk to you a bit about what we're doing in Q2 and beyond. So there's 4 big things in flight today. If we look at the open source side, we're really interested in creating a way to do conditional response variations. Think about this as changing your response based on the context or a specific type of user. This is primarily in research and open source, but we'll eventually fold this into the enterprise product as well down the line. We also have work going on around intent TED policy. And the goal here is to detect if we have unhappy or unsuccessful conversations so that Rasa users can review and add them to their training data. So beginning to use more technology to automate that review and to surface the really interesting things for you to work on and change. On the enterprise side, we've done a bunch of work around entity annotation, primarily usability, but trying to smooth this process and make it much cleaner and easier for you to do, especially when you're going through a lot of entities at once. And last but not least, we're working on a feature we call Workspaces V1. My colleague Ed will go through this in great detail, so I'm going to just kind of let that sit for a second. After that, there's 4 more things that we're working on, or will be working on soon. On the open source side, we're looking at end-to-end. I'm sure you've seen the blog posts over the years from my colleague Alan, the CTO and co-founder of Rasa, talking about how we want to make intents optional. So here again, we're looking for ways to handle unexpected conversational patterns that don't fit cleanly into intents. This is fascinating work. It is labor intensive. There's a lot of testing and validation, but obviously it's something we've placed a heavy emphasis on in the past and will continue to in the future. Likewise, we're working on the next gen architecture of Rasa Open Source. We'll have a lot more to share about that in the months to come, but suffice to say that is in flight behind the scenes or will be soon. On the enterprise side, we're looking at packaging Rasa Enterprise and Rasa X as a single distribution. We have a lot of customers that go from X to Enterprise. We want to make sure that's smooth and clean. You know, that there's benefits to Rasa X users as well. It's just a simpler process to download and install. And then Workspaces V2, this is adding on top of what we're going to ship very soon in V1, is to bring commit changes and Git workflows to non-developers. So again, without taking Ed's thunder, I'll leave it there. We'll be happy to talk more about this in subsequent beyond the release notes. And then last but not least, I wanted to give you some context about the future problems we're looking to solve. When we look out at you know, the sophistication and complexity of these assistants, we realize that there are many different challenges along the way to solve. And I'll touch briefly on them here. We're looking at voice, obviously, in ascendance and becoming more and more the go-to for some of these assistants, and realizing the difference between text and voice, as well as just the number and nuance of different channels within each of those 2 categories. So there's a lot of interesting work for us to do there. Of course, as Alex mentioned at the beginning, these assistants serve large and diverse communities, not just the assistants, but the developers as well, the creators of these assistants. So we want to make sure that we're handling and providing the appropriate tools for everyone to work in multiple languages. We're thinking a lot about what a true platform for multiple distinct user experiences looks like. This is multiple bots. On top of that, then, we're looking at skills as a useful way to group unique capabilities at scale. As the complexity and sophistication of these assistants grows, how do you organize the work across a ton of different people, different domain experts, developers, et cetera, et cetera? And that really pulls us into multiple teams and multiple personas of recognizing that it isn't going to be a single developer building these experiences. By and large, it's going to be many different people in many different areas of, you know, whether it's a project or a company. And we need to account for all those, you know, strengths and skill sets. So we're really thinking heavily about what that collaboration looks like and how people work together to deliver great experiences, great assistance. And then, as I mentioned earlier, context-aware content for different customer types. We don't want to build a giant state machine in the sky. We want to provide very simple rules and ways of changing the response or changing your behavior based on your understanding of the customer. There's a lot of interesting things for us to do here. I'm really excited that we're thinking about and working toward these things. And of course, we'll have a lot more to share in future iterations of this event. And I think that's it for me. So. Who's up next? I think it's you, Ed.
So, hi everyone. Let me just share my screen first, because that's how I'll give you a look at what I'm going to share with you today. My name's Ed. I'm a senior product designer here at Rasa, and I'm going to take you through a brief preview of some things that we're working on for Rasa X and Rasa Enterprise. The first of those features is something that we're calling Workspaces. And what Workspaces is about is we want to enable multidisciplinary teams to work collaboratively to improve their assistance. So this means not just working together, but also being able to work on different topics at the same time. So what this means is adding the ability to do this on top of Raza's existing version control integration, which at this point is mainly there to enable communication with Git, but doesn't leverage any of Git's collaborative features. And Workspaces is something that we're going to do parallel to that, because our goal is to make workflows accessible to all of the members of your team that have an understanding of your assistance domain. And what we see from all of the organizations that we talk to is that the group of people that can contribute to improving your assistant is larger than the group of people that would consider themselves Git users, and in some cases, larger than the group of people that an organization might even want interacting with a Git repository around their assistant. So when we thought about Workspaces, there's a couple of steps to the workflow of improving an assistant that we can distill things down to. What we see is organizations where teams are looking to find and prioritize different bits of training data that they might want to add or improve or change, organizing that work and assigning it when they're within a team to see who's working on what, actually creating or adding the training data. Then there's usually a step of testing and reviewing things, and finally publishing the changes. And when we look at Workspaces, to put that in context, it sits on those middle 3 points, and you can see there are a couple of features that we've just recently launched or that have been there longer that sit on either side of this. So when it comes to finding and prioritizing things, intent insights, and some of the search and filter features we've shipped recently targeted at this. Message tags, which we also launched recently, help with that finding and prioritizing, but can also help teams with organizing work and assigning it to each other. Whilst on the other end, when it comes to publishing changes and also reviewing and testing things, integrated version control and Git play a role there. So let's jump in and take a look at some of the details of Workspaces. So what you can see here is the Rasa Enterprise UI, and Workspaces in Rasa X and in Rasa Enterprise places to collect sets of changes to your training data. So a user has a default workspace when they start, but can basically choose to work in any of the workspaces that are available in the product. And that's where the changes that they make to training data in the NLU inbox will end up. So as I said, yeah, every user has a default workspace, but they can create as many additional workspaces as they want, and everyone can access each and every one of these workspaces. So this is useful, we found, working with organizations, looking at basically setting up a structure that you can add that you can use to support a specific workflow, whether you say, have 3 team members, 3 annotators that you might want to divide work up between, or you have a group of annotators that have a 2-step review process where someone creates or changes training data and a second person has to review that. And we found that looking at message tags in combination with workspaces, we've been able to see with teams ways in which they can use that to support pretty much any of the workflows that we've encountered so far. So the way it works is when you add an example, rather than before where you would be adding it straight to your training data, which would then be ready to commit through IBC, it ends up in a workspace instead. This is kind of the intermediate point between your NLU inbox and your training data. And in this intermediate space, you can view all of the changes that you've added to that workspace so far. You can continue to change and refine them, and those changes will persist. This is different to how things were in the NLU inbox earlier, where if you made changes but didn't save them, then if you were to leave Rasa X or Rasa Enterprise, when you came back, they weren't there. So now once you've added something to a workspace, that's a set of changes that you can prepare and work on alone or with others until it's ready to commit. You can also move things between workspaces, which is what helps facilitate some of these collaborative workflows that I mentioned before. And one of the points I mentioned earlier was about making sure that this works through for people who aren't familiar with, or perhaps even aren't interested in learning the intricacies of Git, which is a powerful tool, but for many has a steep learning curve. And so we've made a few changes, made a few design decisions in the workflow to help avoid things that often trouble people in these collaborative workflows, like resolving conflicts. And so the model that happens is any single NLU example in workspaces can only be in one place at one time. So if you see on the left here, I have a list of messages in NLU inbox, in Rasa X's NLU inbox. I have two workspaces that I could put things in that I've maybe named after improve deny is I may be intending to improve an intent that I have there. Destinations might be an entity that I'm working on also improving. And then you can see some items in my training data there. If I was to then add note to the improve deny workspace, you can see it's left the NLU inbox and is in improve deny. If I then switched workspaces and added a few things to destinations, they're now in that workspace and not in the NLU inbox anymore. If I was to switch and then add a further thing to improve deny, but then decide that actually that doesn't belong there, when I discard it from that workspace, it returns to the NLU inbox. And then if I was to decide that the changes I'd made to destinations there, we'd reviewed them, we were happy with the annotations we made to those messages, we could then add them to our training data, and that would be ready to commit through IBC. And the idea of not ending up with different versions of things in different places is, like I said before, that hopefully eliminates most of the cases where you might end up with two annotators that have created a conflict that then needs to be resolved. So the next feature or set of improvements I'd like to talk to you about is what we've been working on for entity annotations. And I corrected myself there because this entity annotation is not a new feature to Rasa X and Rasa Enterprise. It's been there for a while, but we saw some opportunities from speaking to our teams and our customers that we work with to improve this. And we thought this was important because entities, along with intents, make up the NLU training data for your assistant. But compared to intents, annotations for entities is a lot more detailed. A message only has an NLU example only has one intent, but it can have quite a few entities, and they have, now that we're adding some new features, quite a few different attributes. So there's a lot of clicks there, and that adds up. So what we saw is an opportunity to streamline an interaction like that happens a lot, that has a lot of clicks, has a real potential to improve productivity for your teams when they're working on annotating entities. So to start off here, what you can see, if you're familiar with the way things are in Rasa X at the moment, is we've changed the way that we visualize entities in the NLU inbox for a couple of reasons. We wanted to make it easier to get an overview of what's going on, to make the colors a bit clearer to match with entity types, but also to make the text more readable for you while you're working. And we've also made some tweaks to improve accessibility in terms of making color selection more friendly for users who might have difficulty distinguishing between certain colors, and to make sure that we have text backup so you can quickly on hover see what entity type you're looking at without having to click in and start editing. But once you do start editing, you'll see there's a bit more in here. So the very simple change that we've made is we now have explicit cancel and apply buttons that will make it easier to choose when you want to save or discard data that you might have annotated. We've also, as you can see here, added support for roles and groups, which were an experimental feature that we've had in Rasa Open Source that's proved quite useful, and we now want to give users of Rasa X and Rasa Enterprise the ability to work with those for entity annotation as well. And on top of that, I won't go into detail because I think these are the kind of things that that are probably clearer as you click back and forth through working. We've made a bunch of other small improvements around the interactions and how they work there. So we're excited to see how they work for you and how they might improve your workflow. And that was Workspaces and entity annotation improvements. I'll now hand over to is it Matthew, who's following up from me?
Yep, thanks, Ed. Give me a second here. Let me get this set up. Yep, give me one second to get these slides up. Yeah, so the Twilio Voice connector. This is a future. The Twilio Voice connector is going to be a capability that'll be available to you in the next Rasa Open Source release. So it'll give you the ability to connect your Rasa assistants to that Twilio Voice channel. Okay. So it's coming in the Rasa 2.6 release. With the Twilio Voice Connector is going to allow you to expand that Rasa experience to your voice applications. Yeah.
Sorry, let me just interrupt you real quick. I don't think that we can see your slides.
Oh, okay. Yeah, give me 1 second.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks for bearing with us, everyone.
Hang on, I'll be right back.
Cool.
Hi, everyone. While we're waiting for Matthew, I figured I might just jump in and talk about the new Spacey 3.0 features. I've been working on a feature myself, so I'm very happy to present that. But the new Spacey features really do bring something to the table for the Rasa users. So let's talk about that. I'm sharing my screen now, and then we can talk about it. Let's have 1 moment. There we go. So Spacey 3.0, it's a pretty big deal. In February this year, Spacey released a new major version. And with this new release, there were also some pre-trained models that got updated. As of Rasa 2.5, we are now compatible with this new standard. So that means that if you are using a spaCy NLP component in your pipeline, which would include the spaCy tokenizer, the featureizer, or the entity extractor, all of these models have been updated. They are slightly more accurate. They've been proven to have higher performance numbers on standard benchmarks. So if you upgrade to Rasa 2.5, and if you're upgrading your spaCy models, you might also get a small improvement in your intent classification tasks, which is great. There is also one thing to point out, though. Because spaCy upgraded, some internals have changed, and there's a small deprecation to be aware of. In particular, the spaCy link command no longer works, and this will have an effect on your config.yaml file. It's not a big change, but in the before scenario, it would be common that you would link a, let's say, English Web Core medium language model to English. And then the Rasa pipeline wouldn't need to have a setting configured for the language model that you're using, because it would just use the link that you defined before by matching it to the language that's defined in your file. This will change. In the new scenario, you will need to be explicit and set the model yourself explicitly. Now, it's a minor change, but it is something to pay attention to. What we have done, though, is we've added a fallback. So in Rasa 2.5, if you forget to set your model with this explicit setting, what we're going to try and do is we're going to fall back on your behalf. We're going to assume that you're interested in the medium model. So if you're using this configuration setting, the pipeline will definitely still go ahead and work, but we do recommend everyone to upgrade to this new standard. Now, these new spaCy models, they're great, not just for potentially English users, but the reason why we're really excited about them is because they also open up the doors for many other languages. With the spaCy 3.0 release, a lot of new languages got introduced. In particular, spaCy now natively supports Chinese, Japanese, Russian, and Polish. There's a very large list you can find on the spaCy website, but for all the models listed here, there are proper language models and entity extractors available, which also means that you can get featureizers for these languages now as well. What's also pretty neat is that spaCy, of course, has a giant community, and there are people working on more and more models. That also means that any new models that get added to spaCy are automatically also available to Raza users. So that means that any innovation from the spaCy ecosystem is also something that we can go ahead and use in our virtual assistants, which is great. There is also another interesting side effect of keeping up to date with spaCy that is worth to mention. spaCy comes with models that can detect entities. Like in this sentence, you can detect a company name or perhaps a monetary value. And standard spaCy models come with features that allow you to fetch this information. But there are also specific spaCy models that the community supports. In particular, two that come to mind are the spaCy package and the Blackstone package. spaCy is a spaCy model meant for scientific articles and is very well tuned for that use case. And Blackstone is similar, but for legal texts. The real thing that's interesting here is you can maybe use the models from the community, which would be great, but you can also think and wonder, well, are there maybe models made with spaCy within my own organization? It's well plausible that if you're a financial institute, that you'll have a spaCy model around that can detect entities that have to do with financial texts. What's great is that if you have such a model, then you can reuse the same model inside of a Raza assistant now as well. So that also opens up the door to fully customize your own tools and reuse them across different products in your organization. By keeping up to date with spaCy, we also allow our Raza users to enjoy this. So plenty of things to like of the new spaCy release. We're definitely happy that we're maintaining that. The one thing I do want to sort of mention with like an eye to the future, so to say, is that we're really only scratching the surface in terms of what spaCy can do. And what I'll be doing, at least this quarter and next quarter, is I'll be looking if we can maybe have more spaCy tools be made available in our experimental Raza NLU examples repository. There definitely are a lot of tokenizers for non-English languages that don't have a specialized language model attached, but can still be used inside of Rasa. And that's something we're interested in exploring. And there's also all sorts of linguistic features like part of speech tagging and lemmas that might also be useful as features for our machine learning pipelines in Rasa. So we'll be exploring if we can use some of these features as well, because we think they might be able to make a difference, especially some of our non-English users. Feel free to keep in touch with me if this sounds interesting, because we would love to get feedback, especially from the non-English community. That's everything on my end in terms of Spacey, and I think I can pass along back to Matthew now.
Yeah, thanks, Vincent. All right, let's give this one more go this time with some slides. Okay. All right, great. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the Twilio Voice Connector. This is a new capability that'll be available to you in the next Rasa Open Source release, which is going to be version 2.6. So I'm pretty excited to talk about this today because the Rasa Twilio Voice Connector is going to allow you to expand that Rasa experience into that voice domain so that you can create a similar experience with your Rasa assistant that you're familiar with in text and bring it to voice. And by leveraging Rasa in that voice domain, you can create these dynamic conversational experiences for your end users, where your end users can use natural language to express their needs and purpose for a phone call, and have Rasa provide the response to help fulfill those requests coming in from your users through that voice medium using natural language. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how it works, and also talk about some of the nuances within voice that Rasa helps you, and the Rasa features that can help you customize that voice experience for your end users. So the way the Twilio Voice Connector is working is Rasa is serving as a webhook that you can connect into your Twilio Voice channel. And that can be either a Twilio phone number or a Twilio SIP domain. So what happens is when a user places a call to Twilio through either a phone number or a SIP or forwarded through a SIP domain, Twilio is going to listen to that caller, gather what they're saying, and transcribe that speech into text. And once the caller's finished speaking and Twilio's done that transcription, it's going to forward that transcribed speech, transcribed text from the call, along with metadata from the call, and forward that information to your Twilio Voice Rasa webhook. And when Rasa receives that transcribed text from Twilio, it's going to parse out that transcription and push it into your Rasa NLU and dialogue management models, so that Rasa can help identify what the intent for the caller is, as well as, given the context of the conversation, using that dialogue management model to help determine what the best response is given the context of that conversation. Next, as a part of the connector, Rasa is going to take that response after it's been generated from your Rasa models, and it's going to convert that response into Twilio's TWIML markup language. And it's going to send that formatted response back to Twilio. And the importance of converting that response into that TWIML markup is the TWIML is going to tell Twilio not only what to say back, respond back to the user, what text, but it's also going to tell Twilio how to say that. And Twilio will take that TWIML response provided by Rasa, and it will speak it back to the user on the call. And this process, Twilio will then wait for additional instructions from the user, and it'll repeat this cycle until the call is finished. So to sum up, Twilio is responsible for gathering speech and doing the transcription from your caller, it's sending that transcription to Rasa, and Rasa is determining the intent and best response from the dialogue management and NLU models. And it's providing back the TWIML that tell Twilio how to respond. And one of the things we recognize is how people communicate through a voice and text channel are going to be different. So Rasa provides you some features where you can customize your user experience across these channels so that you make sure that you're communicating with your end users appropriately, given what channel they're using, given what channel they're communicating with you over. So one example is in the upper right. There's an example here of how that's done using Rasa's channel-specific responses. For example, emojis are a perfectly acceptable way of communicating through a text-based channel. They're a very visual medium, but they don't translate well into a voice-based channel. So Rasa gives you the ability to provide these channel-specific responses that you can incorporate into your assistant so that you are communicating in a way that makes sense given the channel that you're interacting with your end user through. So for example, in the upper right, instead of responding with that thumbs up emoji, which would be difficult through voice, we're going to say, if we're interacting with the user, then respond with the actual word in text OK through that voice channel. The second thing we allow is your ability to customize your voice assistant's personality and behavior. We forward a lot of the Twilio voice settings, like your assistant's actual voice, how long you collect speech from your end user, as well as the speech and transcription models that Twilio will run. And then we expose those to you through the connector, so you can control that behavior for your end users. We also have some built-in functionality to handle some common voice behaviors for you. For example, when an assistant answers a phone call, they may not necessarily know what that caller is going to be asking. They don't have that initial prompt that you might get through a text-based assistant, where the user is providing some text to seed that conversation. So you can customize that greeting so that which may be different from a text channel. And we also understand that in a voice channel, you never want your caller to feel abandoned. So we have a built-in fallback behavior where if there's a long period of silence during a phone call, it'll repeat the last bot utterance in order to prompt the user for more information, or just to remind them of where the conversation left off, so that there's kind of clarity in where that conversation currently is. So that's something that we're handling within the connector and wouldn't be something you would have to build on your own. So that's a really brief, that's an overview of the Twilio Voice. Like I said, this is coming out in the Rasa 2.6 release. So I'm really excited to have people begin to utilize this. So really looking forward to your feedback and seeing what you build with this assistant. But it's really going to be a great way to expand the ways and the mediums that your end users can use to interact with your Rasa assistants. All right, so that's all. So I guess, Karen, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Great, thank you so much. Matthew, great. Have you stopped sharing your screen there? And Scott, can we bring you back for Q&A? So we've got a few questions. Before we dive in, I just wanted to apologize for some of the issues that we've been having with the event platform. It's a new technology stack that we're using for our webinars, and really appreciate you all bearing with us and being patient while we work through some of those, troubleshooting some of those issues earlier. So Scott, actually, we did get a question also kind of related to some of those issues about whether or not this webinar would be recorded. So for everyone who's watching, we have recorded the webinar from the beginning. So if you had some trouble getting in, we'll send you that recording and you can catch up on the first half. So Scott, starting off, some of the functionality that Matthew was just talking about is coming in Rasa Open Source 2.6. Do we have an expected release date for that release?
We do. We're targeting May 6th, so
awesome.
not too far away.
Not too far away. And we also got a question about whether Rasa has any plans to provide an end-to-end cloud platform from coding to deploy to production. And kind of a related question, does Rasa provide chatbot hosting services?
Sure. Excellent question. So I can't talk, pardon me, too far into the future, but certainly this is an area of interest to us and clearly to you, as well as open source users and enterprise customers. So it's something we continue to look at. Reach out to me on, I guess, LinkedIn, Twitter, email, any way. And let me know if you want to chat in more detail. I'd love to hear what you're looking for.
Cool. Our next question is Rasa working on an installer that would make it easier to install Rasa Open Source? So kind of particularly running into trouble on AWS Linux and Windows 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we should definitely link up with you in either support or the forum and figure out what exactly is going wrong. We are looking at the installer, we're looking at the install experience and trying to smooth that out, but it sounds like you're having a very specific problem. So I would say forum or get in touch with support if you're a customer so we can help you out.
Cool. Next question, is there a solution in the works for the M1 chip issues with Rasa?
Yeah, so I saw that question come in and went through Slack and various other channels that we have here trying to figure out where we are with that. So I see the TensorFlow now does support the M1 chip, so we need to upgrade and make sure that works. I'll get a story in our backlog so we can take care of that as soon as possible.
Awesome. Matthew?
Thanks for that feedback. That's great.
Yeah, definitely. Matthew, can we get you back on for this next one? I had a couple of questions about the Twilio connector.
Yeah.
So is Rasa's Twilio voice connector only for Twilio, or does it apply to other cloud communications platforms?
Yeah, so the Twilio connector is specific to Twilio. It works with Twilio phone numbers and Twilio SIP domains. But with that being said, it doesn't mean that you couldn't connect your bot to other voice platforms on your own. But this specific connector is going to be specific out-of-the-box support for Twilio voice applications.
Cool. And also about Twilio, would it be possible to build native functionality for voice instead of using Twilio? So some background: for a WhatsApp connection, we need Twilio. But is it possible to use native functionality in Rasa?
I don't know specifically. I know you can do WhatsApp through Twilio. I don't know what the functionality would be or what you would have to do to use to kind of override the Twilio connection and directly communicate with WhatsApp. That's something we would have to look into. But yeah, you can certainly connect Rasa to other voice applications as well. You could use the different endpoints within Rasa to make that work. And you have the flexibility to build your own custom connectors if you'd like. If there's a specific voice channel that you'd like to use, you can build a custom connector to that channel and use whatever voice channel you'd like to use. But if there is if there is a specific medium you'd like to use for voice, you can always let us know, and that's something we could look into supporting in the future.
Excellent. We've got time for, I think, just two more. Scott, I think both of these will be for you. Any plans for role group labeling for entities in Raza X?
Good question. I don't know if Ed's still on and can keep me honest, but I'm pretty sure this is what we're looking at now. Ed, are you still here? I'll have to double check and find out for sure. But
sorry, I am still here, Scott.
Oh, good.
Could you repeat the question there? I got lost.
The question was, are there any plans for role group labeling for entities in Raza X?
Yeah, so roles and groups is the feature that we have currently in open source for that. And part of the feature that I demoed there is bringing support for labeling entities with roles and groups into Rasa X and Rasa Enterprise. So that's part of the improvements that I showed there and will be coming soon.
Perfect. So very good news.
Thanks,
coming soon. I think this will be our last one, Scott. Any plans to support uploading multiple NLU files from the Rasa X UI?
The firm plans, no, but something we continue to look at and explore. So probably best left there.
Cool. Right. Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you to our presenters and everyone who tuned in to join us on the webinar today. Check your email. We'll be emailing some information about how to access the recording after the broadcast. But that's a wrap. We'll see you next month for our May product updates and beyond the release notes. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.